So we got on the train, and Mom took care of the baby Joseph. I took care of Janet, and Aunt Johnny took care of Jerry.
Wow.
And we had a good trip, but somewhere when we stopped, or when the train stopped, we saw, what was the name? This Dorothy Lamour
Oh,
on,
yeah,
on
movie
one of
star.
the stations. We can't remember what station it was, whether it was in Philadelphia or Chicago or even in Denver. Mom says it was in Denver.
Okay.
And when we came, Grandma, was it Grandma met us? And we went to her apartment. It was a small apartment. So she had her and Johnny and Uncle Sonny, and then of course our family of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it was across the street from some school, and I don't even remember where it was. Do you remember what street that was on? Clarkson? And we stayed there, and then we looked for a place, and we couldn't find one. But we found, was that room and board, honey? And it was on the 3rd floor on, was it 860, 880 Logan Street? Something like that. And we stayed there, and we had breakfast and dinner, didn't we? Did you have lunch there?
We didn't have enough.
No. And I told Mom, I'm gonna go to Gates. I said, you go. We knew a Doris Kidd. She was in charge of the Lincoln Park homes at the time. And I said, call her and tell her I'm getting a job at Gates. And I said, and see if she has a place for us. So I
There's a
went,
real housing shortage after the war, right?
yeah,
And it was my birthday.
it was Mom's birthday. I went to work. I went to Gates. And right away, they signed me up. I could start the following Monday. And Mom, in the meantime, she called Doris Kidd, told Doris I was working at Gates. And so she said, yeah, and we moved into 1438 Osage Street. And I went to Gates, and I was hired as a junior assistant traffic manager. And I had a cubby hole for an office. And I made out bill of ladings and all this, and how to ship. So one day I was working there, what, about 2 months, making $30 a week. And the boss came in, my boss came in and said, Joe, put an ad in the Rocky Mountain News, Denver Post for shipping clerk, 56 something a week. And I said, how much? And he was 56 and some cents a week. And I said, why don't I take that job and put in the paper, a junior assistant traffic manager wanted, $30 a week. And he said, you give up all this? And I said, for $20 more a week? You betcha. And that's what I
Yeah.
did. And of course, he was mad at me, and they put me in what they call the old Ford building. It was on across the street from Gates. And I had worked with some real good people. They said I was supposed to treat you junkie so you'd quit. So and Uncle Bob worked at Gates there too, and he worked in the old building. And we got along fine until one day, I think I either saw an ad in the paper somehow about a cutter and spreader wanted. I went and applied for the job, and I got it, and guess what?
What?
The guy who hired me, when he heard the name Falconetti,
Yeah?
he said, do you have a sister named Nancy?
Oh my gosh.
And I said, yes. He said, I played saxophone in the band she sang for.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I don't know whether I ever told you this, but Nancy and Frank Sinatra, every Friday and Saturday night, always sang, was Commissioner Potterton's Amateur Hour in Jersey City, and it was a radio station.
Oh wow.
And there were some weeks that Nancy would win but there was a lot of times that Frank Sinatra would win. And this went on, and then of course Frank Sinatra used to sing at the nightclub, oh, I forget the name of it, that we used to go to when we were kids, especially and when we were in high school.
Uh-huh.
We went to proms and dance halls,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget the name of those places, but he would sing there. And he sang up at the Catskills
Mm-hmm.
when we'd go, remember I told you about going skiing and
Yep.
packing the slopes? Well, on some weekends in the wintertime, he was up there singing.
Cool.
Oh, and then I got this job, and I spread material, and I cut, and it got so I liked it,
Mhm.
and I decided to go to school to take up designing,
Mm-hmm.
and this gal, it was Opal School of Designs, and I bought Esquire magazines, and I would take pictures out of it and make
With Heather?
patterns for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to be pretty good at it. And one day she asked me if I wanted to design and make wedding gowns.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, yeah. And so Mom and I would go out, and she would find the women who wanted wedding gowns, and they would be bridesmaid gowns and all
Yeah.
this. So Mom and I would go out, and I'd measure, and Mom would write down the measurements. I'd go home, make the patterns, or go to
Uh-huh.
school, make the patterns, and cut them out. And she had seamstresses that would sew them up. And there were
Cool.
about 12 of us
Mm-hmm.
in this class, maybe even been more.
Were you getting paid for all this?
No,
Oh, that
No.
was while you were in school.
this was while I was in school.
So were you still working for Brandis while you were doing it?
Working for,
Yeah.
this, and also I was making $80 a month from the federal government going to school.
Oh.
See, so it was my pay
Uh-huh.
plus $80 a month and going to school. Then one day, I come in, which I didn't know. I had designed a gown, and it's a gown that I thought women would wear in Louis the 14th's time,
Mm-hmm.
and low cut and
Mm-hmm.
real nice, flary.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent it to a friend of hers in California.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I went in and she said, Joe, would you like to move to California? I said, I don't think so. I told her about Mom being sick, homesick, and
Mm-hmm.
when we were in Jersey. I said, I don't think so. I said, what's up in California? She said, Edith Head would like you to come and work for her. So I went home. I didn't know who Edith Head was.
Mm-hmm.
I told Mom, I said, there's a woman in California who wants me to come and work for her making gowns and making patterns. And I said, it's up to you. If we go, fine. If we don't go, fine. So, Mom, I think it took her, what, did it take you a week to say no?
I didn't understand it.
But she thought about it,
I
and
said I didn't want to lose my kids.
so we stayed in Denver, and we were happy we did.
Mm-hmm.
Then on part-time jobs, I worked for a guy who made shirts, and we'd go to the rodeo every year, and I'd measure man and
The stock show.
stock show,
Uh-huh.
and measure cowboys, make patterns for them,
Cool.
and cut out shirts, and of course, it was the Bray Company. Wasn't it Bray? B-R-A-Y? And he would have seamstresses and cut them out. And they have all kinds of shirts, and I would fix the material that they would match, the pockets would match, and when you sewed them up, every line and
Mhm.
everything matched. And we did this, and I then Brandis went to Western Art, so I went to Western Art with him, and at Western Art, they started making, they made pajamas there, and Mr. Rosenbaum, who owned it, was a little bitty guy, and so his wife was even shorter than him. And they were real nice, and they liked me, and so he said, whenever you want, you can design something. So at that time, who was the cowboy? Davy Crockett.
Oh, yeah.
Davy Crockett was popular, and we already had a TV. When I worked for Lou Lilienthal, he bought a TV for us. Matter of fact, it's the one that Jerry wants down in the basement.
Really?
And when the kids were little, they would watch this TV, and they were alone. The three of them were alone when we lived on. When we moved, we had to move from
The project?
the project because I was making too much money. This home we had on South Pearl Street.
Uh-huh.
So the kids were alone for about a half hour, what they alone. And so they watched the TV.
Mhm.
So one day, watching TV, they had Davy Crockett on. So I went back and I told Brandis, I said, I don't know, what about making pajamas for boys and girls for Davy Crockett? He said, Davy Crockett? I said, yeah, it's a show my kids watch every afternoon.
Uh-huh.
I said, well, see if we can make the Davy Crockett pajamas. So he called Mr. Rosenbaum, and whoever they called,
Mm-hmm.
they got permission to, and I already had made patterns for Dave, only they were little patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and then Rosenbaum liked them, and those things went over wild.
All right.
Sears wanted them, Penny's wanted them,
Wow.
Montgomery Ward wanted them, and there's a place in Chicago, was it Marshall Field?
Yeah?
And Marshall Field couldn't get enough of them.
Well, I hope you got a bonus or something.
I don't remember, honey. Honey, something I never did was sign my checks. To this day, I don't know how much money I made downtown. I worked, then Western Art. Oh, I gotta tell you this. The Rosenbaums always went on trips.
Mm-hmm.
And when this year they were going down across the equator,
Oh, cool.
and they said the both planned a big party for when they were crossing the equator, and they wanted somebody in the company to come up with an idea for a costume.
Oh.
So sitting there one day, I told Donald, I said, Donald, you know it would be great if Mr. Rosenbaum wore a jacket type that just fit him from his head down to his shoes, and Mrs. Rosenbaum wore a pair of pants from her head down to her shoes. And he said, how are we going to do it? I said, I can do it, but I need a lot of time. And he said, you got it. So after work, I would work on this pattern. And after I got it made, at first they didn't like the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because he kept saying, I wear the pants in the family. You know, it was this type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got it made and they tried them on, they loved it.
Oh, cool.
They said, that's what we will wear. And then when they come back from the trip, I got a bonus, didn't I? For doing that.
$50.
Wow.
$50.
Really happy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and when I worked at this place where Brandis hired me, on Saturdays, I'd take Jerry, Janet, and Joey with me, and they would play games, and I put Joey on my spreader, and I'd sit him on there and walk back and forth with him while I was spreading material.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I was finished spreading and was ready to cut, then I'd take the kids home. Then I went back in the afternoon and cut all that. But I didn't, and that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Oh, and then, while I was at Gates, I forgot to tell you this. We got a call from Grandma,
Your mom?
my mom, saying she wanted to know if I would like to go and live in Italy. She said the Falconetti land, they want somebody to come and claim it. And there was land in Sicily and land in the city up in the heel of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, right away we said no, we didn't want to go. And George, at the time, he didn't want to go. Well, nobody wanted to go. So I suggested to Mom to see if she would give it to the relatives that she had
Mm-hmm.
over there. And I don't know whether that would ever become of that. And then we made wedding, and then I worked for Brandis, and then I worked for let's see, I went to work for Hill, Justin Hill, and they made, uh, what was it, aspen leaf was
Mm-hmm.
ski outfits,
Mm-hmm.
and I helped design some of those and made some of those. And Janet she got to wear a lot of those ski outfits.
Mm.
And then from there I went to work for Jerry Outdoor, which was
Mm-hmm.
Colorado Outdoor.
Mm-hmm.
And working for them one day, they come in and one of the Kennedys was making a trip up.
Aspen.
No, they were going up on a mountain. Was it Mount McKinley? I don't remember. And they wanted tents that were light to carry, that you can fold up. And Jerry Outdoor had one that folded up into a package about that big.
Wow.
And it had the rods in it, all
Wow.
this. And he said, Joe, can we come up with something because it's cold up there? And I said, well, what would you like? And he said, well, we got the tent, but it's real thin. I don't think it's warm enough. I said, well, let's put it up and see what we can do. Maybe we can make heavy material.
Mm-hmm.
So we made it out of heavy material, but it was too bulky.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what if we put a liner over it? The tent's only just a little bit, and maybe the air
Mm-hmm. Really?
would help it to keep you warm. And he said, okay. He said, we'll make a fly to it. And that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Made a fly on it. And we had 2 packages that were about that big. And we fixed it so the rods
Mm-hmm.
would connect to the outside and inside.
Cool.
And then there was he got an order. Hollywood was making a movie,
Ice Station Zebra.
Ice Station Zebra. And he had measurements. He wanted me to make the patterns for him. And come to find out it was for Rock Hudson and I forget the other guy. But there were 3 or 4 actors that we
Mhm.
made patterns for. And
Did you
that
see
was
the movie?
No, honey, I never did see the movie.
Mm.
From there, what did we do after that, honey? We went on the fire department.
When did you quit working
When
in
the
garment
flood,
industry?
well, from Justin's to Colorado Outdoor, and there was a guy that made panties, and I went and helped him make plastic panties.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was working for him, that's all he made were plastic pants. And I suggested that he make clothing, and I set up, you'll probably get them, instead of going by age,
Mm-hmm.
in small, medium, and large, and extra large, I went by weight.
Mm-hmm.
If a baby, no matter how small it was, weighed like, say, 12 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
then a 12-pound baby would fit into it, or 24-pound or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was something new at the time. Instead of going by age, it was by weight. And he was competing with a company called Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was working for him at the time of the flood, and I was on the Littleton Fire Department.
Mm-hmm.
And that day of the flood, I was acting captain. John Cernich was supposed to be acting captain that day, and he got sick,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't call in. Butch Kinkle was acting chief because all of the volunteer firemen and the officers in the paid department went to Cortez, Colorado on a fire department, of the state of Colorado, where they competed on
Uh-huh.
carrying hose and fire trucks
Oh,
and
wow. So
all of
the
this. So
really-
all of them were gone.
Uh-huh.
And about 11 o'clock in the morning, we got a phone call from Stan Bush,
Mm-hmm.
and Joey was on the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
They were down at Castle Rock, and some kind of a thunderstorm, and they called it a water funnel, hit down there, and it just wiped out a mountain. You could see where all the trees and everything. And Plum Canyon, Plum Creek
Uh-huh.
was flooded. And he called, and there was a guy named Glenn Roop,
Yeah.
who was new, got the message, and that Plum Creek was flooding, and the water was, some of the water at times was 20 feet high when it was coming down. It was water and mud. And we sat down to eat, and Glenn said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Stan Bush called and said, we're getting a flood down Plum Creek." And I said, "What?" I said, "When did he call?" And he said, "Oh, about an hour ago." I said, "Glenn, Plum Creek runs into the Platte Canyon just down here by Blakeland." I said, "You better get him on the phone. We better be calling Denver Water and Englewood because we're going to have a flood. Better call the police department."
Uh-huh.
I said, "Let's call the city manager." And we called Butch. Butch come over and he'd say, "God, you should have told me at 11 o'clock. I said, "Butch, I just found out." So, and of course, what turned out, want me to continue? Okay, in 1967, I was promoted to engineer.
You didn't finish about the flood.
Oh, the flood?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see, Kinkle wanted to know why we didn't call him sooner, and I told him that I just found out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, we got to get in touch with the city manager," which we already had. That was one of the things I did while Glenn Rope was trying to get in touch with Stan Bush.
Mm-hmm.
I called the city manager and told him. And of course, anytime Stan Bush called something in, it was a big ha-ha.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
told him, I thought this, I said,
this is serious.
yeah, I said, was Gail Christie? I said, "Mr. Christie, it's got to be serious. He wouldn't be calling in and saying there's a flood if there wasn't one." And I said, "And Plum Creek runs into the Platte River, just near Blakeland." Well, Christie at the time was new to the city too. He said, "Well, how big is Plum Creek?" I said, "Well, it's really just a little bit of a stream." I said, "Once in a while it might be maybe a foot wide, and there's times it might be 3 feet wide, and then it could spread out." I said, "Because it's real weird down there." I told him it was down by Titan Road.
Mm-hmm.
No, he didn't know where that was. I said, "The extended Santa Fe, as you go under the overpass," I said, "it's down that way. And you know where the Platte River is?" And I said, "It runs into the Platte." So he said, "Okay, I'll be right down to the fire station." He wanted to know where the chief was, and I told him Chief Easton was down in Cortez, and acting Chief Butch Kinkle was getting in touch with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "So everybody'd be on the way back." I said, "But I don't expect them back for at least a day, not from there."
Yeah.
So all this was going on, and of course the flood, I don't think hit until that next morning or that afternoon, hit Littleton. Of course, the Denver Water Department I called them right away because they had lines that had to be shut off on both sides of the Platte River.
Well, Jerry worked for the Denver Water.
Yeah, Jerry worked for the Denver Water at that time too.
Mm-hmm.
And Joey was a
Joey Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, and he was down at Castle Rock at the time, Joey was.
Mm-hmm.
So Denver Water come right out. Of course, Denver Fire Department thought it was a ha-ha because they said Stan Bush, when Stan Bush says something that's, it's wild, I guess they thought. Especially Englewood. I told Englewood, this got to be serious. He wouldn't be calling something that wasn't so.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on. And then, of course, Butch and Gail Christie, they took everything over and just wanted me to get somebody on the other side of the river, which I called John Cernich at home. I said, "John, come down and get the 26, engine pumper 26, and take it across the river." I told him what was happening.
Did he think it was serious? Did he understand?
No.
No.
Stan Bush again. See, it
Mhm.
was one of those things. So he come in, he said, "Okay." So he come and they got some volunteer firemen, and he was the only paid man that went across the river. And of course we tried to get off-duty firemen to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was all set up that we had paid and volunteers across the river. And when the flood hit, it just went wide. Columbine, a lot of homes in Columbine Country Club were flooded.
Did you get
The
people out in
racetrack.
Canada? Did people get out?
Oh, yeah. Nobody, as far as I know, no one was ever hurt. The horse racetrack was over.
Mm-hmm.
They got all the horses out. You know where King Supers is now,
Mhm.
all over there?
Yeah.
All, the only thing you can see over there were the rooftops. The water just flooded all over down there.
Were those houses down there then?
No.
Jerry Maryland used to live at that one time.
No. Oh, yeah, those were there.
Were they
Those,
flooded?
all those homes had water in the basement.
Well,
Yeah. Matter of fact, Jerry's home, when they moved in on, had the smell of
Yeah.
water in the basement.
Hmm.
And then, after this was all taken care of, I think they called in the National Guard. And all this was handled real great.
wow.
When this was going on, God, I forget what all the things were. This is still going. Then in 1967, I was promoted to engineer, and when did I have my blood clot, honey? That was in 68 and 69, wasn't it? And I had hernia problems, and I got a blood clot. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then in 69, there was another test, and I made lieutenant. I become lieutenant at Station 2. And that's when Mom got sick. And Dr. Monterano wanted us to take Mom to see Dr. White at the University of Colorado, the Arthritis Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And they were treating Mom. And I think in, what was it, 70? Mom got, was it 70 where you got the cold shot and almost died? Was that 71? That was 70, wasn't it? And we took her, remember how quick, I was on duty and I got come home and we took her right to Colorado General Hospital. And right away they put her on prednisone.
Mm-hmm.
And we were really worried then. And then she got better and we took her home and she's been on prednisone ever since. And when I was lieutenant at Station 2, Safeway up